Accountability is saying, did you get the result that you were wanting to get? If you didn't, why not? And is that a problem or is that not a problem?
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Tonya here with none other than my co-hostess with the mostest, Gwen Bortner. Gwen, if you're just catching the show for the very first time, is an expert in business operations. She is the CEO of Everyday Effectiveness, and she is probably hands down the best person I have ever met when it comes to accountability. And so today, what I want Gwen to do is I want Gwen to educate all of us, including me, on what true accountability is and how it fuels sustainable success. Because I'm not going to lie, I'm one of those people who did not go into business for myself to be told what to do by other people. So I'm resistant to this, but I know you well enough, Gwen, to trust you that when you tell me it's good for me, I will take the bad medicine. So tell me, what is true accountability and why should I care?
So the first thing that people get wrong is they think being reliable and accountability are the same thing, which they are not. So you can be completely reliable and not accountable, and you can be completely unreliable and accountable.
You gotta explain that to me because I just heard wah, 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 wah. Okay.
Because here's the thing. Accountability takes two people. Reliability is about an individual. Okay. And so, but people will conflate the two, thinking that if I'm doing the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing, then I am accountable. Well, or they'll say I'm accountable to myself. Well, no, that actually is not. If you look up an actual definition of accountability in like a Webster's dictionary, it will say reporting to. And you can't report to yourself. I mean, you can think about it, but it's not the same as reporting to. And so it takes two, minimum of two, you can use more, but it takes two to have true accountability. Now, part of the true accountability where it really makes the difference is it's not just reporting, but that the person that you're reporting to, or people, but the person that you're reporting to actually cares about your result. And that they're also owning part of this relationship. It's not just like, well, send me the information and, I'll keep track of it for you. Well, that's not actually true accountability. Saying, hey, I noticed that you haven't sent it, and or saying, I saw this happen, let me give you some feedback, where I'm really paying attention to the details of what the back and forth is of whatever we're being accountable about. That's where true accountability happens. So it's not just, checking it off like a task list. That is not true accountability. That's tracking. And that's data, and that's information. And you know how I feel about data and information. I love that stuff.
Right.
But that is not real accountability. Real accountability takes both people caring about the result of the person who's being held accountable. And it does take at least two people, and it does take a back and forth interaction, not just a one-way interaction.
Okay. So, and you've taught me three things just now. So you've taught me tracking, which is like done or not done, right? It's my list of things. I did it or I didn't do it. Then there's reliability, which is I said I was going to do it, so I did. Or I trust that that person's going to do the thing that they said they would do. And then accountability is related, but it's this whole other thing that isn't just independent. You said that's key, right? It has to involve at least one other person, and there has to be some back and forth with it. And the reason I'm making the face I'm making is because mentally, and I do this all the time, like I run everything through a use case in my brain, and it always looks like I'm rolling my eyes at people when really I'm just thinking. But I think of all the accountability groups out there and all the ones I've been in, right? I've been in an accountability group where my job was, at the beginning of every week, I was supposed to write out my task list for the week. Like, these are the things that before my head hits the pillow on Friday, I'm going to do these things. And I've had ones where it was the end of the week where I was supposed to report on everything I did this past week. And in some cases, somebody was looking. In many of those cases, really the bounds of the program was simply it would be checked off, right? My name got a check mark because I did the thing, but nobody really circled back with me on any of it. And in other cases, they'd circle back, but it was really like, good job doing the thing you said you would do. But nothing else, right? And definitely not an inquiry and maybe like what came up that I wasn't expecting or any sort of examination. And when you're talking about the two-way conversation, it sounds to me like part of accountability is also not just did you do it, but that exploration about what else came up. Is that accurate?
I will say it's accurate for my definition.
Okay.
This is where probably other people would argue with me and say, no, that's not needed. But
yeah,
for me, true accountability says not only are we making sure that the thing that we're doing is getting done, but we're also examining. And I like that word that you used. Examining is really a great word for it. That we're examining what was done and saying, was that actually the best thing to do? Did we learn anything from it? Are there, and sometimes we don't learn anything from it. That's okay. And maybe there's not a lot to examine. That can be true. But for me, part of the accountability is doing that examination on an ongoing basis. And, sometimes it is about, woohoo, nice job. You got something done. It doesn't always, everything doesn't have to have this deep, important meaning because that's not the way life is. But there are things that do, and not paying attention to that means that you aren't really being held accountable. And to me, we often can't see the things that have meaning for ourselves unless either someone has asked us to really think about it, because we're entrepreneurs, we're busy, we're doing things, or we just can't see it for ourselves, because sometimes, it is hard to do true self-reflection. I don't care what anyone says. It's why therapists exist. It's hard to do. It's hard to do true self-reflection. And so that to me, that's part of what the accountability is. Someone saying, this seems interesting. You might want to pay attention to that.
Okay. So I hear you and I believe you. And yet I can also imagine, okay, fine, pull from my own recollection examples of business owners who would resist that because they would feel micromanaged. So help me understand, how is what you're describing not micromanagement? Or how is it maybe you could say, well, it would be micromanagement if we did this, but it's not when we do that.
So to me, micromanagement has a couple key elements that I don't necessarily see in accountability. Okay. One of them is it must be done a specific way or it is wrong. Okay. That to me is micromanagement of, it's not just we're starting here and this is the result we need. It's, you've got to do this step, this step, this step. That's micromanagement. Okay. That to me is one of the first and key definitions of micromanagement. The other is that we're checking in also at every step. To me, that also is micromanagement, that we're saying, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Which,
how about now? Did you do it yet?
Yeah. How about now? Yeah. To me, all of that is micromanagement. Accountability is saying, did you get the result that you were wanting to get? If you didn't, why not? And is that a problem or is that not a problem? Because micromanagement would pretty much always say that's a problem because I'm expecting this result. Where for me, accountability is like, I didn't actually do the thing that I was going to do. And to be able to say, so is that a problem or is that not a problem? And say, no, it's actually not a problem. I realized that I was doing this because someone told me I should, and it's not actually going to move my business the way I want to move it. Okay, great. That's actually outstanding accountability, but it has nothing to do with micromanagement.
Okay. And so
Is that
I'm curious.
Enough of a distinction for you, or do you need?
It does. No, that is. But just the quick follow-up question is: do you think the motivations behind each are different, or do you think the micromanager actually thinks they're holding the person accountable?
Oh, I think often a micromanager feels like that's how you hold someone accountable.
Okay.
There's a whole giant conversation that we can talk about why that may be and all the rest of it. We don't need to do that today. But I do think people feel like that's accountability, where part of my definition is we're looking at what was the result and what did we learn about that particular result. And is that whether it was the result we expected or not, and based on that, what do we need to know going forward with it? That to me is a very different accountability.
Got it. Okay. So now I understand how micromanagement and accountability are different. I also understand the difference between tracking, reliability, and accountability. I want to ask, this is going to sound very trite, right? I want to ask, so what's the big deal? Why does this even matter? But rather than ask that, I'm going to actually be much more specific with you and ask, can you give me an example of where your definition of true accountability, where putting that in action actually made a difference in a business?
I can give a great example without revealing actually very many details, quite honestly. I mean, we work together, so you know that I have been using an accountability process with my clients called the weekly course of action for years now, for years and years and years. And one of the things that was interesting is the first thing I noticed, because at first it was completely voluntary and I wasn't really, strongly encouraging it and whatnot. I just thought it was a good idea. But the first thing I noticed was the clients that went through the process regularly, which isn't this giant process, but they were actually every week going through the weekly course of action process, were actually making progress faster than similar clients who weren't. And what I realized in that process was this taking a little bit of time every week for the self-reflection aspect that we have in the accountability was allowing them to make better decisions faster than continuing to do the same thing that wasn't necessarily really providing the results that they were looking for. So that's the very generic. But I will say, it was, I don't know, a year or two ago, we had someone come in who was only doing the accountability aspect with us. They were not getting any one-on-one coaching or any of these other things. And they said at the first quarter review period, they said, I got more done in this quarter that actually is moving the needle on my business than I have in the last 2 years. And she said specifically, because I knew someone else was going to look at my report and give me feedback. She said, it wasn't because I didn't know how to do any of these things. She said, because I've not needed help in that kind of capacity. But just knowing that someone else actually cared helped her do the things she needed to do. And she said, and I knew if I did get stuck, that there was someone who was actually going to give me some good advice on options or things to consider or a resource or something else. So it wasn't that I would just be stuck and there I would be. That there was someone who was on my side.
Okay. So your sort of real life example then is taking that business owner who, like, all things being equal, they weren't actually doing things any differently than they were doing before, except for reporting their activity or their goals, and then having somebody mirror that back to them, read it, respond, reflect with them. And so what I'm hearing there is I think there's a piece of us that if we think we can hide or we think nobody will find out, we're just not as motivated to do the things. And I don't even want to say the things that aren't fun, because there's a lot of aspects of business that aren't fun that people go about doing all the time. Right. But there's certain things that are just easier not to do if nobody's watching. Can you think of specific aspects of business that's true for?
I do think it's for a lot of the operations of the business, because very few people, except for a few weirdos like myself, find the operations actually fun and interesting. They find the customer interesting. They find the product interesting. They find the service interesting. They may even find the marketing and the sales process interesting. Even often when they say they don't like it, they still find it interesting. Because it's creative and it's innovative and and they get to use all of the skills. And a lot of times the operations is a little more mundane, repetitive, not as exciting. No one's giving you kudos when you've cleaned up your books, because no one actually knows that you cleaned up your books other than you and possibly your accountant. And so, there's a lot of stuff on the back end that doesn't get the same feedback loop. And so I really think a lot of those things are the things that people know need to be done, but they don't do, not because they aren't capable, not because they don't know it's important, not for any of the reasons, but they're not getting that feedback loop that's actually helping them move forward with their process.
Right. And I can see that. I'm, again, just thinking through all the things going, yeah, well, I wouldn't want to clean those up if nobody was going to pay attention, because you know what? Those things are not fun, and I want gold stars when I do not fun things. So if nobody's going to notice that I didn't do it, they're not going to give me my gold stars.
Right. But we notice the process, the course of action. We notice, and we actually, if you're reviewing it, you definitely give them gold stars because you are the emoji queen. But I've started even giving emojis, the little, party hats and, the champagne bottles and the thumbs up and all, because we all are kindergartners at heart. We all want gold stars.
Yeah, well, and I'm a big fan of the heart eyes and the star eyes in addition to the party hat, because I feel like when was the last time any of us got a sticker? Emojis are my version of stickers these days.
Yes.
So, okay. So one more question that may take us a while to go through, but I think it's important. Do you like how I preface that? Just like, it's okay if you have to talk long, Gwen. I know that before I'm asking the question.
It is helpful.
when it comes to establishing accountability, I just see that it could be possible for somebody to start out on this path and just do a lot of things wrong. And I think we've already addressed one of the primary mistakes, right? Which is confusing or conflating accountability with micromanagement. Okay. Do not decide tomorrow you're going to hold your staff accountable. And in holding them accountable, you start to ask them what their process is for processing through their email each day. You're not going to win any friends if you do that. Do not let them just do their email however they choose. Okay. All that matters is, did they respond in an appropriate time? But aside from that, right, where one mistake being starting to micromanage versus actually practicing true accountability, what do you think are some other mistakes that business owners would make?
The first one that popped into my head, and I'm sure there are others which hopefully will come into my head also because as an extrovert, I'm processing as my mouth is moving. So there's a good chance more will come to me. But the first one is actually the other end of the extreme of micromanaging, which is just saying, did you do it? Okay, good. which for me is fundamentally the opposite end, is the checkbox of just saying, okay, great, still no processing of it. Now, not everything in life constantly needs to be processed. Let's be, serious about that as well. We don't need to process everything all the time, but looking at the accountability in just the yes or no is not true accountability either. It really is about saying, what did we learn from this? What do we know about this? What are some pieces of information? And like I said, not on everything every time all the time, but things that are really feeling core at the moment. And this is the important part, is at the moment to the business. Certain things are core to the business today that won't be core to the business in 4 weeks, because they're actually running super, super smoothly. And so the kind of the checkbox, did we do it, is all that we need. But when things are feeling not quite right for whatever reason, either should it take more time? Should it take less time? Are our customers happy? Are they not as happy as they should be? Any of those things that we think is touching that, to me, that's where that reflection piece of the accountability comes in. Not only did we do it, but could we think about it differently? Could we try something different? Do we actually need to be doing all of these things, or could we eliminate some things? Should we be doing more things? It's all of those pieces, and being open to that thought process all the time. That to me is the real piece of the accountability. And I think, like I said, the opposite extreme is making it so performative that we don't ever get there.
Right.
It really just becomes the task list.
Yeah, well, and it sounds to me like part of this practice of accountability and establishing accountability is, okay, you have to recognize that, did you do it or did you not do it, right? That's a starting point, but that's not the only part of it. But also, just doing it isn't always automatically the win. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes, you're supposed to make 10 calls on outstanding invoices, and you don't want to do it because these are uncomfortable conversations. On one hand, just making the calls is a win, but how you have those conversations, and I would imagine the relationship you have with the other person on the other end of the conversation, is also an important piece to document in this accountability process.
Well, and so let's just use that as a great example. Luckily, this is not a problem that we actually deal with very often within my own business. But let's pretend, because I think it's a great example. So, someone needs to make 10 calls about past due invoices. Great. So, did we do it? Yes. But did we hear anything consistent? Right? So, for instance, they're not actually receiving the invoice at a place where they're paying attention. They don't realize that they haven't paid the invoice. Okay. Well, that's actually a really good accountability piece of not just making the call, but saying, hey, what I'm hearing is out of 10, 8 of the 10 people don't even remember receiving the invoice. That means we've got a different issue there. We've got a root cause problem that we need to address, because my guess is at least half of them probably would have paid the invoice if they would have gotten it. Right. And so paying attention not only to just doing the thing, but saying, is there any, and this to me is what the accountability process is there anything I learned from that? And the answer may have been no, right? If we're processing 1,000 invoices, a month, and 10 of them didn't get paid, they're just the random 10 that didn't get paid this time, for whatever reason. Okay, so just making the calls was the thing that we needed to do. But it also could be something that in 3 weeks you notice that all of them were paid except for one within a week of that call. And it's like, oh, making these calls actually is important, right?
Right.
And so it's about bringing things forward into our consciousness
Okay.
that we may not know that we need until further down the road.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important too, right? Is that what's important now, or what seems important now may not seem important later, but that true accountability function helps you figure that out.
It
Okay.
does.
So this is really good. Anything else that you think a listener should know about true accountability? Because I do feel like you talk about it differently than other people.
Yeah, first, I will say I never realized it until you and I started working together.
Till I was like, wait, you're a unicorn. I never hear this.
Right. Yeah. And that was also helpful because it was like, so what is different? And I will say the first is I or someone on my team is going to read every weekly course of action document every week. And they know that. And if I'm out on vacation for 3 weeks, then usually Tonya, it's you. But also Andrea, who is technically the person doing I'm just checking the box piece to make sure that you did it. I'm thinking a couple weeks ago, as she was checking the box, noticed a comment and said, "Hey, let me reach out to you. I've got some resources on this." So not her job.
Right.
At all.
No.
Right. I mean, truly, that is not her job. But because we use this accountability within our own team, she's used to looking at it. She's used to thinking about it. She's used to responding. And when she saw that she could help, she just immediately did that. Which is back to, it creates this ongoing behavior for everyone. Right.
Well, and it also, I mean, like, it just opens the door for people to help each other out, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not so siloed.
And you're not seeing it as a criticism. It's not, oh, well, you didn't do this. Shame on you.
Right.
So that didn't happen. Is there a reason? Do we need to fix it? Is something broken? Do we need to be doing it at all? It changes the conversation. One of my very, very early on customers who was doing the weekly course of action exclusively described it as non-judgmental accountability. And so I think that's actually, you said, what else is important? Okay, that's the thing that's important, is that we don't approach it as, well, what you did was wrong, right? Or you have failed, or
F. You get Fs.
You get an F
business ownership.
Gold star. We only give gold stars. We don't give Fs, right?
Right.
And so instead of approaching it with that right or wrong, yes or no, good or bad, those kind of things, which I think often people assume accountability is. If I didn't do the thing, then I'm bad, I'm wrong, I failed. To me, accountability, and this maybe is part of the thing that makes what I do different than for some accountability, is to say, so why? Why did you not do the thing? What's preventing you? Was it actually important? We're asking other questions, not saying, well, obviously you failed.
Right.
Because, we've had folks on their accountability process have something that they were going to do this week and next week and the week after that and the week after that. And, for a few weeks, life happens. I don't get too excited if someone doesn't get something done in a few weeks. But at some point it's like, so I notice this is continuing to get pushed to the next week. Do you know why that is? Is it because you're actually stuck and you need some help? Is it because you don't actually know how to do it? Is it because you realize that maybe it's not actually that important? Do you need to even keep it on here at all? We're asking questions without saying, well, obviously you suck because you pushed this particular item for 5, 6, 7 weeks.
You promised you would do it this month, and you have not.
Yeah.
Okay, let me recap really quick. But thank you for this, Gwen, because this is, I say this, I know, at least every third episode, but I feel like this one could be the most valuable one to date. Because, you know, if you've been listening all the way through, you now know the difference between tracking, between accountability, and also between, good golly, what was the third thing? See, I've already forgotten when there's tracking. There's accountability, reliability. We also understand now the difference between accountability and micromanagement, and where we landed that I think is so important, because we went through a few different mistakes that a lot of people make. But the big one is the judgment piece, I think, Gwen, is not only do you need somebody else to work with you on your accountability, because it has to be a two-way street, but that person has to either be non-judgmental, or they need to be able to communicate their questions in a way where you don't feel judgment. And I think that is an important one to land on. And so what I would love is for you to email me, right? Because we are all about the conversations around here, both me and Gwen. Email Tonya at everydayeffectiveness.com. That's Tonya at everydayeffectiveness.com. And I would love to know your experiences with accountability. Have you had this true sort of two-way reciprocal relationship that we've been talking about in this episode? Has it looked different? And kind of, what do you think about that, right? No judgment, no blame, no shame, but just very interested to have that conversation. And thank you again, Gwen, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.